But the problem was that the way in which it was discovered was not capable of human consumption. It could not be consumed by human beings. Now that is the development, let's say, which Novartis took it forward. And why you need the industry to be able to do that, because much of the expense, when we talk about $2.6 billion, much of that expense happens in the process of clinical trials. You have to go through 4 phases of clinical trials, and most of the expense happens there. And that's really where the industry comes into it. So that collaboration is important. So one is, of course, you have to recognize patents to begin with, to get people to make the effort. And secondly, then you have to create an environment that enables you to do that. And thirdly, you have to be able to create a mechanism by which there is enough, offtake of that medicine. So for example, if I discover today a new medicine in India, of course, I will sell it internationally at various prices, but within India, I may or may not be able to sell it at the price that I want because of the lack of, because of the out of payment, self-payment kind of issue. There is really no payers, there is no support for the kind of cost that that drug would require. To give you again, a real life example, some years ago, Novartis was planning to set up an institute for research into tropical diseases. Now, India was definitely a country that was considered as a place that we should headquarter this. But because of the enabling environment not being present, it was unfortunately headquartered in Singapore. Now there was no, and I don't know, but I think a lot of the people in our Singapore institute are Indians who are kind of doing it sitting there. But so as I said, it's really a question of creating an enabling mechanism through IPR, creating an ecosystem that supports the idea of innovation, and then creating an assurance of a market at the end of it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
No, I think Sandeep has given, I think, the most important one, so I won't elaborate perfectly.
Thank you so much.
Another question there, yeah.
Good morning, sir. Sir, as you said, in orphan diseases, there is no much spending on R&D. My question is there a problem that off-labeling of prescriptions for orphan diseases is a hurdle or an alternative way so that pharmaceutical companies skipping on investing R&D on orphan diseases? Off-labeling of drugs.
So if I can understand your answer correct, that pharmaceutical companies do not invest in orphan diseases so that they can use it off-label? Is that what you're saying?
No, actually, for orphan diseases, doctors using off-labeling drugs, off-label drugs. The drug is patented or for some disease, but its other effect is for other diseases. So especially for orphan diseases, doctors using off-label prescriptions. Is there an alternative way, or it's a hurdle that's why pharmaceutical companies are not investing in R&Ds?
No, maybe I think it's a slightly different perspective here. Orphan diseases, as you rightly pointed out, I think by definition they're few by number, the number of patients available around the world. Now, I think the ecosystem of every country is very different. So if you look at the more developed countries, the ecosystem is such that the regulatory authorities may actually give you approval in phase 1 or even phase 2 sometimes by taking a chance on these products. While in India, as you know, we cannot do phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. We can only do phase 3 clinical trials. And I think that to some extent is usually a hurdle because you can't do a phase 3 clinical trial and therefore you cannot introduce the product into the market as per our standards. So you'll see there are a number of orphan drug diseases. In fact, the US FDA accelerates the approval of all of these orphan drug diseases, even if they are small in numbers, and approvals have been given. We have a product called AZD 9291 for small cell cancer, and guess what? The US FDA gave approval on phase trial because of the progress-free, the disease progression which would stop. So the authorities, the systems, the science, the regulatory authorities should also be relatively more advanced in ensuring that such, I won't say chances, but such developments are taken into consideration.
I'd just like to add one other point. There's also another kind of philosophy that is now coming into the whole business about orphan diseases, is that really the companies are examining these orphan diseases and going to payers, looking at the entire cost of, looking at the outcomes. So for example, for some of these often, some of these diseases which you term as an orphan disease because very few people are afflicted by it. So while, one way to look at it is that, there would be a huge cost per person that would be needed to be paid by the payer in order to, pay for a drug developed in that disease area. But the other way to look at it is that in the context of an overall health expenditure, because the number of patients are so few, that if you multiply even that high amount by the number of patients, the amount is not really large in the context of the overall, health cost of the nation. So it's really the question of the country realizing that it wants to give equal opportunity to even, such diseases. The second way in which to also look at it is that in the health system, that if you are not able to address that orphan disease, often the cost of maintaining that person on the system also needs to be taken. So the entire area of health economics and looking at HTA and looking at all those kind of things is now getting more and more sophisticated. And I think one of the outcomes of that would be, pun unintended, that orphan diseases would get their attention.
Any other question? Maybe only I'll add one comment on orphan disease is there is a lot of work which has been done in this area, and important thing is the payment system, payer system has to go up because the cost of treatment for orphan diseases has been very, very high. And unless we build on that payment system, which is very, very advanced in many of the developed markets of the world, we will not be able to take forward that agenda. There are companies like AstraZeneca, one talked about. Sanofi, in fact, has bought a company which deals only with orphan diseases. So that's the area which will be very important going forward. What we'll do at this stage, I would like to thank both Sandeep and Sanjay taking time out and coming here today. First, we will thank both of them. Let's give a big round of applause to both of them. And we will present memento to both of them, and then they can.
Just a minute. Just.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. We are charmed by your sharp fluency. Your session was full of enthusiasm and valuable knowledge. I would like to request our co-chairperson, Dr. Gurbani sir, to present souvenirs to our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please have a big round of applause. I would like to call on stage Dr. S.D. Gupta sir to present a souvenir to our chairperson. Sorry, sir.
Continuing, now we would like to invite Dr. Srinivas. He is Associate Professor in National Institute of Pharmaceutical Education Research at Hyderabad, and he has extensive working experience in R&D, particularly new molecular discovery, precisely in the Dr. Reddy Laboratory for more than 20 years, and now he's closely associated with the NIPER Hyderabad. I'll request him to please enlighten with his experience.
Good afternoon, and I thank IHMR for inviting me for this to share some of my thoughts and experiences with you in the next few minutes. So, having spent close to 18 years in the pharmaceutical industry, especially the Indian pharmaceutical industry, in the new drug discovery programs, and also very closely associated with the academic institutions in India, I have observed few of the things which is summarized in my first slide, which says that it's clearly the collaboration is the key for innovations. And so as you can see in these slides, you see the example of the very famous example of the corticosteroids, which were discovered in the lab Mayo Clinic and also in the Basel University. So this particular discovery would not have seen the light of the day had the Merck did not come forward to develop a process for making the compound in the large quantities for clinical trials. The similar is the case with the discovery of streptomycin, which is discovered in the laboratories of Rutgers University. And then again the Merck came forward for setting up a plant for production of this compound in the large quantities. And mind you that these were the two discoveries which won the Nobel Prizes in the 1950s and 1952s, and also had a huge impact on the healthcare at that system. And going forward, again you see the discovery of anti-HIV drugs. In the 1990s, if you see, AIDS was an epidemic. Like, there is no cure for it. But with the discovery of the protease inhibitors, the trend has reversed completely, and now it is more a manageable disease. It is not no more an epidemic. Then again is the case you see with the case of the cardiovascular diseases. In many times, as in the most of the olden days, the cardiovascular disease also is considered as something which is not curable, and only in the 1980s when actually the statins were introduced into the system, and also many of the other cardiovascular medications were introduced into the system, then this actually has the trend started reversing it. And there are other examples of Taxol. If you see, it's a life-saving drug, even to this day, and this is the first-line treatment for many of the cancer patients. And most of these discoveries, if you really look at their history, these discoveries are happening between a close association with the pharmaceutical industry and academia. And one will not be sufficient enough to take the discoveries forward, because each one has a complementary strengths. Not only in the discovery side, even in the development side. For example, there is a very recent discovery of a very novel, efficient process for making one of the very important drug called artemisinin. You know, most of you know that it is a anti-malarial drug, and also now, apart from the chloroquines and quins, so this is artemisinin is used as a first-line treatment for treating many of the malarial diseases, and that has been developed in the universities in Max Planck Institute. So now you see there is a good collaboration between the academicians and the pharmaceutical industries, then only any discovery can happen. That is mainly precisely because it is not each one is not competing with each other, but each one is complementing each other's strengths. What one has, the others may not have, and what others have, one may not have. To develop some kind of an ecosystem where these complementary strengths are synergized and utilized properly, that is where the most of the discoveries happen. As most of you are asking, why in India the discoveries did not happen? It is not that it did not happen, but it did happen, but they did not see the light of the day because of several other reasons which are actually involved in the drug discovery process. For example, at Dr. Reddy's, when we were there, we had a huge effort in finding anti-diabetic drugs, and also similarly Ranbaxy laboratories. But now we have Zydus Cadila, which has actually put the first anti-diabetic drug in the market, which is developed solely in India. So India, it's also happening, but may not be the kind of a thing which is happening at the MNC's level, may not happen because of the size and strength of the companies which India has. So now you see these slides, which clearly says that we require to use the complementary strengths of both academia and pharmaceutical industries. And also, as we know, that innovation in the pharmaceutical industry is a must, and it is a continuing need, mainly because many of the diseases still we do not have an answer. We have not understood most of the diseases to their full strength. That is why you try to attempt to cure a disease with a particular medication, but for that medication there is an improvement which is going to be required, maybe because of the side effects that medication is going to happen, or maybe because of the resistance which is going to happen to that medications. But there is a big challenge in the innovations, especially in the new drug discovery, mainly because if you see this graph, which clearly sees the amount of money which is spent on discovering drugs is inversely proportional, or maybe the kind of the success rate is inversely proportional. So that is why most of the companies are shying away from the drug discovery programs also, but nevertheless the efforts are going to continue. And most of the reasons, if you really see in this particular graph, which is a scheme which you see, it is starting the pre-discovery to the late clinical stages, and also preclinical and also post-clinical trials. If you see, especially at the pre-discovery stage, we know that many of the diseases we have not understood completely. So what we call them as orphan diseases or rare diseases, which are only in the subpopulations. For example, Gleevec was discovered as a drug only for treating a subpopulation of the US. But what is now is a blockbuster drug. So that means still we have not understood many of the diseases. So probably that is one of the areas where we have a lot of gray areas. So that is one of the most gray areas where we have still not understood many of the diseases. Pathophysiology of the diseases is not understood. That is why whatever the medication we are trying to give, it is not optimal. And also many of the failures are because of the wrong understanding of our perception of the wrong understanding of the disease. That is why many of the failures are happening even at the clinical stage. Supposing if you see this graph, the nature of the inventions, most of the inventions are failing in the clinical stages. If you see from the phase 1, if you take the 100%, the compound which is going to the clinic, which is seeing the light of the day, that is only 6% of that. So this is where huge attrition is happening from the number of molecules which are entering into the clinical trials and this. And also, as mentioned by my previous speakers, it is the most expensive game. And also clinical trials are the ones which are going to be very expensive, and this is where, and still we have not understood completely why the compounds are failing in the clinical trials. So this is one of the biggest challenges in the drug discovery space. So then how do we go forward? So what are the biggest challenges is, one is the safety, one is the efficacy, and also you have increasing R&D spends, and also slowing down of the inversions. So then the answers are not many. So only one is basically the building up of the externalization of the R&D efforts is one of the only ways by which you can manage the problems. So it is understood now at this moment that no company can have completely all the internal R&D resources which are meant for doing it, but you have to have externalization of most of the researches. So that is why most of the companies, they are following a symbiotic model of innovations. Whereas you have a big MNCs, so they work with academia, and they work with small biotechs, and they also work with what is actually called as a CROs, contract research organizations, and many of Indian companies, Indian CROs, they are very successful in translating most of the discoveries into the clinical stages in collaboration with most of the big pharma companies. So now this kind of a symbiotic relationship between academia, biotech, and also the MNCs is the one which is going to be the key driver for moving the drug discovery innovation forward. So now if you see, when you want to understand this, when it is good to see and it's good to talk that, we should have an industry-academia relationships, but also when we really want to put into the practical use, like, for example, when I have moved from industry to the academia, so I have to understand and I have to appreciate what is actually the academia needs. Why academicians, most of them, we perceive that want to be silo and they don't want to be collaborative. So there are some specific roles which actually the traditional academicians wanted to have. One is creation of a new knowledge, and also education, and also service. But right now, most of the academic institutions, they are perceiving their roles to be different. So they want to innovate, they want to help most of the startup companies. As you see, most of the Indian institutions, so they have, the startup companies, they have these knowledge parks which are well built within their campuses so that anybody can start their own companies. And licensing of intellectual property, so that is being perceived it's versus publication versus patenting. So that is, the value of patenting is being realized much more. And also promotion of extensive industry-academia relationships. So now, if you really see the differences between the academics and industry, so academicians, it is your own choice to decide about a project, but at the same time, in the industry, it is decided by the management, by taking into account the economics of it, the commercial potential of the project which you are going to take. And whereas in the academics, it is just like you need to get a grant from the government, and here you have a publications, but whereas you have a proprietary, so that means you want to have a product. So these are all the differences which you normally see between the academicians and the industry, and anybody who wants to collaborate, so they need to understand and appreciate the differences which are being seen here. And then, if you see why academicians want to partner now with industries, when they know that there is a sufficient differences between the industry. So one is, there is an increasing feeling among the academicians that they don't want to be solo, and they want application of their research to go for a public good. And at the same time, that cannot happen if you do not have an industry partner who can take your idea to the public. And as a result, you also have basically exposure to industry collaborations. But again, the exposure into industry collaborations is more that you want to translate your idea into a meaningful kind of a collaborations. So your industry perspective, why they want to go with academia is, research institutions are very rich sources of new ideas and technologies, which normally it may not happen in an industry because you are driven by profits, and sometimes you may abruptly close the project, and all the knowledge which is gained during that project may be lost. So if you see both the academics and as well as the industry, they have a conflicting values, but they have a common interest to commercialize new and useful technologies. So now if you see in India what is happening is, it is very heartening to see that both the industries and academicians, they are trying to come together. And also most of the funding agencies like DBT, so they want to fund a project if you have an industry partner, an academicians. And also even a small startup company can apply for a grant if they have an academic partner. So the idea is just not to get the money, but the idea is to promote this kind of a synergy between the academicians and the industry so that a meaningful research can come out of it. But at the end, I would like to add a point which is very closer to my heart. So in the academicians, our major role is to train students. Why do we train the students? We just not to give them a good class about how to speak good English or how to stand confidently in front of any member who wants to take you for a job. But our job is to make them ready for life as well as for a career. So there is a difference between a career and a job. So you want to train them for a career, you want to train them for a life. So this is the job of a teacher. So how do you do that? So most of the students, they need to graduate, and after graduation, they should be industry ready. So that means basically they can go and start their job on the day one. So this enhancement of the higher learning industry is something which actually can happen only if an industry participates very actively in the academic roles. So for example, if you see, now you have a large business potential in Indian pharmaceutical has. For example, in our institute, every year we have around 20 students graduating from the pharma management and almost like 100 students graduating from the pharmaceutical sciences. Almost 80 to 91 of them, they just go into the industry roles. So that means there is a lot of need for most of the pharma professionals to go into the jobs. There is a large business potential. But what most of the industries they feel is there is a talent shortage. So that means these students are not ready. So they still need to be on the training. Even after you training for 10 years, 15 years, but still the industry feels that they are not trained well. So that means this gap can be enhanced only with an active participation from the industry and academia, and only when they come together and see where are the gaps and see where we can fill in the gaps. That is where we can actually do a lot of justice to the younger generations. With this, I thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity, and having spent both both in the industry and as well as academia, but I still proudly say that I am from academia because I love this more. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, first thing has come to the last end. Initially, the session was to begin with the opening remark of chairman, but because the other two speakers were to leave early, so chairman decided that he rather sacrificed his order, and I'm grateful to him. And now I request him to please fulfill the unfinished task.
So good afternoon to all of you. We had to change the structure of the presentation slightly. Can you show the slides? We had to change the structure of this panel discussion because of time, but we had a great, outstanding speakers, Sandeep, Sanjay, and of course, Dr. Srinivas, who talked about the academic collaboration, which is fundamental for innovation. What I'd like to do is take from where they left and summarize some of the areas. And what we have done, we have collaborated some of the data which will give insight if our industry has to move forward. As we were seeing, if you see, the greatest advantage that India has today is to get up the value chain as far as the pharmaceutical industry is concerned. Two industries which I've been harping in every seminar, every forum, that can make difference to the Indian industry is the pharma industry. Here is the data, latest data. India has moved 17 ranks in ease of doing business. India is today #1 country in attracting foreign direct investment. And the point which Sandeep was talking about, that if you strengthen the innovation climate in the country, and if you strengthen the ease of the business in this country, the foreign direct investment starts going up. And that is what is happening. It is just the beginning. You are at the inflection point where there's going to be a lot of difference. Second point at the bottom is we are 81 out of 142 countries in innovation index. But if you see output of efficiency of innovation index, we are 31. Because whatever we do in India, we are much more cost effective. And if we increase the thrust on innovation, there will be tremendous change as far as Indian climate is concerned. And today, I will say India is ideally poised to capitalize on the innovation culture. I've been talking about this. If we see over the years, pre-1970 period, I was talking about this slide, and Dr. Gurbani suggested to me there is a different culture. Before 1970, everything was imported in the country. We used to import around 80% of the products in India. If you see period of 1980 to 1995, we became the manufacturing hub of the world. And today we have got more than 500 plants. 1995 to 2005, again, there was thrust on creating manufacturing capability in this country. We could produce any products. We started supplying products around the world. It was the days of innovation. 2005, the product patents came in this country. And now we will see from 2015 onwards, it will be the decade of innovation. There will be a lot which will be happening here. There is a lot which is being talked here, and I will discuss why it is important, but we will see the context slightly much more in detail. Why it is important for us? If we see at this particular moment, we compare ourselves with China In India, only there are 1,000 patents, whereas in China, there are 23,000 patents. So we have to strengthen the patent culture in this country. We have to strengthen the innovation culture in this country. And why it is important, if you see Indian scientists, Indian technocrats, both in India and both in US, in any company of the world in US, whether you go to IBM or Microsoft or Apple or Novartis or Abbott, you find Indian scientists working there. So there is an innovation climate. What we need to do is to strengthen innovation climate in this country. We had the advantage today. This is the top 10 innovators in the world. And the 3 innovators were present here. We had Sandeep from Novartis. They spent $10 billion on research. We have AstraZeneca and we have got Abbott and AbbVie. We spend around $2 billion as far as the research is concerned. And if you see the spending of the top 25 companies, it is only $1 billion. So the problem is we have been more interested in copying. We are more interested in reverse innovation. We have not been spending adequate money on research. And that is fundamental issue. But once we start investing on research and investing it productively, it will change the dimension. It is not that we are short of money. It is the question of investing in right place. And I will give examples from Abbott what we are trying to do. This is again, if you see the top 10 products in the world. Humira is our product, Abbott product. It is around $12 billion, which is almost the whole size of the pharmaceutical industry is around $15 billion. One product by the company contributes $12 billion. And the largest size of the product in India is $100 million. So what will happen if we strengthen the innovation climate in this country? The whole market will unleash in this country. We will not become only the suppliers in India, but global suppliers. And the point which Professor Srinivas was making is, yes, there's a crunch of money, but if we spend it rightly, there is a tremendous opportunity. Now, I say that there are 3 reasons why India stands tremendous advantage as far as innovation is concerned. The average age in India is 27 years. 65% of the population is less than 35 years of age, and hence, if we play that game right of innovation, we start creating that innovation culture, which we are seeing in the startup industries, in the IT industries. We are seeing a lot of delivery innovation which is taking place. There will be a tremendous movement going forward. If I look back, 18th century, 25% of the world trade used to happen from India. We are talking, there is a growth in the Indian industry. Whatever we may say of India, we are among the fastest growing economies. But if we get the thrust right, innovation we will become the hallmark to spur the growth of this country. And that's why it was right on part of Prime Minister Modi when he was there in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. He wanted to give the message that innovation is very, very important, and we need to strengthen the patent law in this system in the country. Will patent come in terms of in way of access? Certainly not, because still more than 95% of medicines in this country is out of patent. There is need for India-specific innovation. There was a beautiful article last week by Swaminath Iyer where he said that unless we strengthen patent laws in this country, who will innovate for the drugs in this country? Like tuberculosis is very common in this country. Child mortality, infant mortality is very, very common. Still, there is a problem. We have got 63 million diabetics in this country. Unless we spend on the diseases which are common in this country, who will spend on those diseases? And it is very, very important that we in India, our scientists who are doing a lot of work in the labs outside US, start investing in research in India so we provide that innovation climate as far as India is concerned. Last thing I will say that now is the time to unleash the innovation culture in this country, and the 3 areas which will become very, very important. One is the academic collaboration, which Dr. Srinivas highlighted, very important. Wherever in the world the innovation takes place, there's a tremendous collaboration between the industry and the academia. Secondly, we have to increase the investment, because unless there is investment in innovation, there will nothing take place. We have to respect the scientists in this country. We have to respect the academicians in this country. We have to go away from the mentality of copying. And we as a company, in a small way, we have made tremendous investment in India, and we are setting up R&D labs in this country which will do research in the field of nutrition and pharmaceutical area. Because we think India can be a hub for innovation. India is a manufacturing hub, yes, but India can become an innovation hub for the world. Because why these scientists who go outside the country, why can't they do research in India? And the third part, which is very, very important, is the intellectual property right. In 2005, we came with a patent right, which is further strengthened. We are in the process of evolution. And I think all these three factors, whether it is intellectual property rights, whether increased investment in innovation, and whether increased academic industry collaboration, will unleash the champion and unleash the power of growth in this country. With this, what I'll do, I will request Dr. Gurbani to conclude this whole session and for his comments. Dr. Gurbani.
Thank you, Dr. Sudarshan-ji. And after hearing so excellent speakers and the chairman with his concluding many new ideas and sharing new concepts, I just look at the theme again and try to relate how this session is related to this also. It was well shared in the opening remark by the president of the IHMR, Dr. Gupta, and the chief guest, that all health parameters, all health indicators have improved considerably. I wonder whether this would have been possible without pharmaceuticals. No. While including immunization, vaccines, they are all pharmaceuticals. So medicines have always been core and will continue to be core as far as the healthcare is concerned. And in view of the challenge of emerging new disease scenario, as well as failure of present drugs due to resistance and other reasons also, there is a constant need for innovation, for the new molecules and new discoveries, and we cannot do without that also. So that's the imperative. At the same time, it was also shared by one of the eminent speakers that cost of bringing a new molecule or a new drug is very high. On conservative terms, we treat it as $1 billion, but the first speaker quoted something around $2 billion. And mostly another issue was also shared that although the discoveries are being made in the universities, but drug development is taking place only with the help of pharmaceutical companies, because that's a very, very cost-intensive proportion also. So no industry will invest so much unless they see that there is a return on the investment. There's protection of the intellectual property right also. And that is why in WTO in 1995, when this agreement was signed, it was made imperative that TRIPS agreement will be the part of the WTO, and all countries are expected to set their house in order also. Now looking at this, lots of African countries and developing countries, they made a lot of representation with the WHO that cost of medicines will be unaffordable. And ultimately, World Health Assembly asked the WHO to look at this matter. And with the agreement, a joint study was commissioned by the World Trade Organization and the WHO. And the conclusion of this studies was that trade cannot overtake the health. Health has to be the priority number one, trade is secondary. And also this study shown good aspects of the TRIPS agreement, that this agreement is not in any way going to interfere with the access to health, and there are sufficient flexibilities which are available, which can be availed while trying to align the patent legislations of their respective countries. And in direction to that, the WHO was asked to circulate all these provisions, and they published books in a number of different languages, and millions of copies were distributed, globalization, TRIPS agreement, and access to medicines. And fortunately, India has been one of the countries which has used all these flexibilities. And at the moment, there is a slight impression in the industry that we are not favoring the innovation, but that's not the case. And On the contrary, there is another pressure, especially from the US side, that's TRIPS Plus. They want more evergreening of the patents. And lots of countries have requested India not to accede to that pressure. So what is important is patents are important, but we have to strike a balance between the access to medicines as well as innovation. With this remark, I thank you, the chair, my eminent speakers, and all of you for giving your time and listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Your session was full of enthusiasm, valuable knowledge, and true inspirations. Now, I would like to request our co-chairperson, Dr. Gurbani, sir, to present souvenir to our speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, please have a big round of applause. I would like to call on stage Dr. S.D. Gupta, sir, to present souvenir to our chairperson and our co-chairperson. Friends, please have a big round of applause for our chairperson, Dr. Sudarshan Jain. Friends, with this, we come to an end of this session. Now, it's a time for tea break. I would like to all request our guests to move towards the lobby. Tea is waiting for you all. We'll resume our session at 3:30, at 4 o'clock for the next session on reducing cost of healthcare and finance. Thank you, all of you.
Ravindra Karanjekar, CEO, Jupiter Hospitals, Mumbai. Co-chairperson for this session, Dr. P.R. Sodani, Professor, the IHMR University, Jaipur. And finally, the speakers for this session, Dr. Vivek Desai, Managing Director, Hosmac India Private Limited, Mumbai. Mr. Anirudh Chakravarti, Founder, Bottom Line Consultants, Mumbai. And Dr. Anup Daga, Associate Professor, Hospital Administration, AIIMS, New Delhi. Please give them a big round of applause. I request the volunteers to give floral welcome to the dignitaries. Dr. Ravindra Karanjekar. Dr. P.R. Sodani. Dr. Vivek Desai. Worked as Chairman HealthCom at National Board for Quality Promotion. We welcome you, sir. I shall also take the privilege to introduce the co-chairperson for this session, Dr. Prahlad Rai Sodani. Dr. Sodani is a health economist and public health economist. He obtained his PhD in health economics and his Master of Public Health from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, USA. Dr. Sodani is Secretary, India Public Health Education Institution Network, and has been actively associated with Southeast Asia Public Health Education Institutions Network and has coordinated numerous international conferences. I request Dr. Sodani to introduce the speakers.
Okay, well, thank you, and welcome to all you in this session after lunch. And it is also on the cost and financing of healthcare. So please be careful about this session. And you need to be well to listen the learned speakers of this session. I have a privilege to welcome and introduce all the learned speaker of this session. On my left-hand side, Dr. Vivek Desai. Dr. Vivek Desai is the founder of Hosmac Limited, and he is a well-known expert in hospital management and hospital planning in India as well as abroad. And he has significantly contributed in the area of hospital planning, hospital management in the country as well as abroad. And he has expanded his organization in a very limited time globally. So we welcome Dr. Vivek Desai in this session, please. Thank you, sir. On my right-hand side, Dr. Anirudh Chakravarti is the founder of Bottom Line Consultants from Bombay. Mr. Chakravarti had an experience of around 20 years in the area of training and consultancy, specifically in the quality improvement and business excellence. He had an expertise in the Six Sigma, means that implementing the Six Sigma in the organizations for improving the quality of care, intelligent cost reduction, as well as the operations risk management. These are the domain areas of Mr. Anirudh Chakravarti, and I welcome, sir, in this session to you. On the extreme right on the dais, Dr. Anup Daga. Dr. Anup Daga is from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in the area of hospital administration. He worked at a senior capacity in the various corporate hospitals in India. Before joining All India Institute of Medical Sciences as a faculty, he worked as a national coordinator at ICRI, New Delhi. Recently appointed as a program director as well as the Academy of Hospital Administration, New Delhi. NABH, JCI, Six Sigma, these are the major areas of concern for Dr. Anup Daga. I welcome you, Dr. Daga, in this session. Now I request Dr. Vivek Desai to have a presentation, please.
So, getting into a session without tea. Yeah?
Yeah, this is a challenge.
Yeah, this is the challenge. And it's another challenge, you know, when you are a doctor and you have been asked to talk about reducing cost in healthcare. All right. I am not actually a public health person, and when I heard, you know, in the morning, people talking about public health at large and, you know, the Kerala example and many other things which were being talked about, I was a little scared. I'm not from that field actually. So when this topic was thrown at me, you know, that you have to talk on reducing cost on healthcare, I did try and find out what exactly I'm supposed to speak here. There was nothing much which was told, except that what the other two speakers are going to speak. And, you know, once they speak, then I have nothing else to speak actually, honestly speaking. So what I'm going to share with you is, you know, what I think in terms of the avenues which are available to you to reduce healthcare cost, okay? And I've tried to break it down the way I think it is. So it's going to be very maverick, you know, it's not going to be any structured kind of a, you know, presentation, so please forgive me. Ask questions whenever you feel like, no problems with that one. No, I'm going to skip this. This is about HOSMAC and this is our client list and blah, blah. So, cost of, you know, providing healthcare, if you look at it from that angle, is into three basic elements as I see it, okay? One is to do with creating infrastructure, which is to do with land and building and equipment, that is technology. Then, you know, there is providing of services, you know, which is currently broken down as government versus NGO versus the private sector, and now, you know, as I could also see in the poster, a lot of mobile health and e-health, you know, kind of stuff which is coming up, which is also going into the space of providing healthcare. So that is going to be, you know, the cost of providing future healthcare. And then, you know, how can you reduce the cost of buying these services? You know, so either you are in government, you have to buy services. In private sector, you have to buy services, you know, through either out-of-pocket expenditures, through insurance, which can be various types of insurances, ESIC, or whether you want to give it free. Okay? So that's going to be what I'm going to talk about. Let's talk about the cost of infrastructure and see whether, you know, along these points as I've enumerated, whether what is the scope of reducing cost of, you know, these infrastructure. First and foremost, I come from city of Mumbai. There has been no single corporate hospital which has come up in Bombay, except, you know, some of them which have come on trust-owned land, because the cost of land is prohibitive. Okay, you cannot imagine the cost of land to put up, you know, hospitals in big cities. Whereas if you go to, you know, smaller cities, this is available. Now, whether the government wants to give it free, concessional rates, if it gives on concession, then what's the kind of, you know, in return the government would like to have, all that needs to be, you know, discussed and understood very clear, because otherwise you will have the Apollo hospitals in the Prastha versus the, you know, Delhi government kind of case which still goes on, okay. So land, you know, will need to be provided at concessional rates. The other thing which, you know, which is my subject actually of talking, is the optimum designing of this infrastructure, okay. You cannot build all hospitals, you know, in a style which is corporate in nature, or, you know, say for example, you have a hospital in Jaipur city which is from top to bottom cladded in glass, you know. So if you create that kind of infrastructure for providing healthcare, it's also going to cost you money, both to build it as well as to operate it. So do you want to get into that kind of a thing, or we go back to the drawing board and do something else? Okay, so design of hospitals need to be optimal. There are WHO guidelines for developing countries about how hospitals should be built and engineered, and it might be good to, you know, learn some lessons from there, you know, because there are many things which we could do in rural India or semi-urban India. Primary versus secondary versus tertiary, the infrastructure is going to be different, all right? But in some cases, and Dr. Karanjikar is here, you cannot compromise. I remember once I was asked to write an article on air conditioning of operation theaters in hospital buildings. And I wrote, you know, that I was also like you, maybe fresh out 10 years, and did a hospital management program, and I said that in primary and community health centers, You need not use a, air conditioning system, which is the, filters and laminar and whatnot. And you could go with a split unit and, a window AC. It was rejected. They said that you cannot have dual standards, of providing health care when it comes down to things like operation theaters and, other things. So there was one lesson learned. There are certain things which are non-negotiable and certain things which are negotiable. Okay. That brings me, to the next. So if you're wanting to build a tertiary care hospital, or nowadays you call quaternary care hospitals, you will have to spend the money. But when you're talking of primary and secondary, you could go to the next point and say that I would like to spend less on the frills. Okay? So I may not want to drape a building in glass. I may not want to put Italian marble. Okay? I would like to go with material which is local, okay, which is serviceable, which is cheaper. Okay? So building material actually doesn't attract patients, to be very honest with you. You go to Hinduja hospital today, it still is with Kota stone, and very cheap granite. So it still can be done. So cut those frills. One of the things which is happening in healthcare industry is we are called as consultants to design hospitals. Dr. Saab, your hospital, should be the best in the city. I mean, but it's not so much to do with the architecture as you would do with the technology and the type of doctors. And by the way, by the time the hospital ends, the promoters run out of the money, and he's not willing to share it with the doctors who are actually going to deal, and bring you more and more patients, right? So we need to be intelligent enough how to cut this cost. Whatever you're going to spend, you're going to recover, from the patient. So even if government today, is going to spend, all right, it's going to recover not maybe from the patient, but from us, the taxpayers' money. So one needs to understand that very clear where this frill business need to stop. Okay. Energy efficiency, there's very little which has been talked about this, and if you read, the newspaper since Prime Minister Modi came back from the US about, India willing to go into Paris in December 2015 with a reduced carbon footprint of almost 33%, which is a very tall order. Now, mind you, hospitals are guzzlers of electricity. Okay, they are literally guzzlers of electricity. We did a survey for the Confederation of Indian Industry about 5 years ago or 4 years ago, and we found at that time, taking 25 hospitals across India, in the corporate sector, of course, it was not government to that extent, and we found that we were about 600 rupees per bed per day was the cost of electricity alone. Okay, so that's the kind of expenditure that you will put on electricity if you don't plan your building as green. Okay, energy efficiency. And the government has taken, the lead in this. All government hospitals are now bound to be designed on GRIHA, guidelines, which is green building guidelines. GRIHA is a government body, which, is like lead, in United States, the same way GRIHA has been adopted by the Indian government. Because hospitals run 24 hours. Things like, operation theaters, intensive care units, imaging diagnostics, laboratories, all these need to be 24 hours air conditioned. Okay? So you need to adopt, design and technology which helps you to cut these kinds of costs. Intelligent equipment buying, why do everyone wants to buy iPhone? I have not understood till now actually, honestly. I bought an iPad, maybe more so because Dr. Karanjekar had an iPad, so it was important that I also need to have an iPad. So my son till date, tells me that if you bought an iPad, it has 64 GB RAM, whatever that means, or data, or whatever this space, and you have not even used 2 GB. Why do you need? You should give that to me and trade mine, with you. So most of the times we go and buy a Mercedes Benz, when you need a Maruti Zen. Okay? So that kind of a thing should not be done. Spend the money, in terms of economy, I sort of am partner to Dr. Sodani in terms of teaching health economics in Tata Institute. Money is always scarce. You need to spend that, intelligently. So you need to buy a bedside monitor. If your monitor of 1.5 or 2 lakhs is good enough, you need not go and buy a 4.5, 5 lakh worth monitor, with all kinds of parameters thrown into it. It's not of any use. Okay? I once asked Siemens, why do you need a 3 Tesla MRI? Do I really need? He said, sir, to be very honest with you, answer is you don't need. 1.5 Tesla is more than enough. It's just for status. If you want, if you do a lot of research, maybe yes. We go and buy 64 slice CT scan, and now 128, and someone has gone and bought 256 also. I don't think that much of technology is required for all hospitals. There may be very few hospitals which should use that kind. Otherwise, 16 slice CT scan can do 95% of your work. So why buy something which is, and that money can be deployed somewhere else. Okay. So that's something that will help you cut cost. Pooled buying. I think this is something which I think time has come, and this poster competition that I was seeing there, I think one of you, as Irina was saying that, your students, and you should come out with newer things, which will change the way things are done. I think this pooled buying is something the time has come. Hospitals, and there are people, who are sitting on the stage who can help you to do something like that. With pooled buying, look at, the buying power of a government, okay, or buying power of a group like Apollo, or buying power of a group like Fortis. When they buy, or say an HCG, when they buy linear accelerator, which would generally cost 10 crores, the guy is buying it in 5 crores. That's the kind of power of pooling, okay. Taxi aggregator, you've just tasted it, how Uber has changed the way we used to travel. I used to be, I'm a Maharashtrian, so I'm penny pinching kind of a person. So I always used to travel from home, to airport by an auto. My staff would travel by taxi, but I would still travel by auto, trying to save that, whatever. But since Uber has come, the difference is hardly 20 bucks, So that's the kind of change that it can make if you get into pooled buying. And this will not stop only at equipment, this would go into consumables, Bombay has 40,000 nursing homes, if someone just starts that kind of a e-health, m-health or whatever, you could see the impact that it could get on cutting the cost. Of course, it's a different story how much of it will be passed on to the consumer, but I think there is a potential to cut cost, by a very large margin. The last thing in infrastructure is about life cycle costing, okay. Today's newspaper, Frontline in Times of India, diesel cars are going to be more expensive, okay. Most of us used to buy, including myself about 4 years ago, would always buy a diesel car, thinking that it's a cheaper way of, transportation. But if you take that asset, compare it with a petrol car, and go over a 10-year or a 5-year period, you will find that it's more expensive to own a diesel car vis-a-vis a petrol car. So always try and do a life cycle costing when you are acquiring assets which are expensive. See an air conditioning plant in a hospital, right? Now, it can run on gas, it can run on diesel, it can run on electricity. Your choice, okay? Take a gas-fired plant, your electricity cost will be very low, all right? There are many hospitals which are trying with, there was a hospital in Bombay, I can name that hospital, Breach Candy, which went and did a wind turbine because it's next to the sea coast, okay? And it could run some departments just based on that, kind of thing. So there are some things which on a life cycle basis, if you calculate, are much cheaper, when you see, say, building automation system, for example, okay, may sound expensive in the beginning, but over a period, it pays back in 3 years flat, all right? So try and indulge into these kinds of practices which will help you to cut cost in a longer run. A little bit upon, project financing, where, one has to deal with how to, get the money, isn't it? It's easy to talk about it, but one needs to also find the money to, fund these kinds of, see, if the government of India wants to, say, build, healthcare infrastructure, there is no money, I guess so. Okay, it takes, why government is now today not building medical college projects? Because it costs them 500 crores to build one medical college. By the way, that's also from the poster. We need double the number of doctors to be there in healthcare ecosystem today in India. To make a doctor takes 5 years. I don't know it, we used to pay hardly about 3,000 or 2,000 rupees as fee. Today you pay 2-3 lakh rupees a fee per annum basis. So if it is going to take us that much of cost, then we need to know that whether there can be something which can be brought in as cheaper, project finance, all right. Unfortunately for hospital projects, the tenure of loans had been 5, 7 or 10 years, okay. We once did some work with IFC and World Bank, and we tried to come up with something which was a 20-year, project loan, and we could see that it was, putting less pressure on the project in its formative years. See, otherwise what happens is, because you need to pay back, you start indulging into practices which are not good. Okay, so someone has to do something, at policy level to see if we could cut, those costs. You need to look what is the best option, for debt equity ratios. Everyone generally tries to put in more debt than equity. It's good to do that if you are a private practitioner with a smaller setup, but at bigger scale, you need to be careful about the debt and equity ratios. Okay, any tweaking in the interest rates and you can be wiped out. Sources of other finances are donations and private equity, which is coming in a very big way. Okay, we've worked with some private equity, worked with Carlyle when they invested in Medanta, and it takes a lot of heart to put in 1,000 crores in one project. They did that, okay, and it's giving them, returns in a very short time. Whether the debt should be in Indian rupees or foreign exchange, okay, foreign exchange loans are generally cheaper, but it's not very easy to get those loans, but if you can get it, nothing like it. There was one project in Bombay, Hiranandani Hospital, which went through an Exim Bank funding and which had a very cheaper, loan rates which were there. So you should try something like that. We are doing a project in Nagpur which is funded by IFC, and that loan is cheaper. But mind you, anything which gets funded by World Bank or IFC needs to be a green building. It's their the rider that they put on. Leasing options, something that, as an Indian, we don't believe, especially from where I come, Maharashtra, we don't believe in leasing, we believe in owning, and that's kind of a problem, and that's something which I did. So learning from my experience, I took private equity, put the entire money into, real estate by buying offices, and I think that was a big mistake. Okay, I should have actually leased, used the finance, for better marketing, better salaries to guys like you, or an IIM graduate or something like that, and maybe try to grow the business rather than trying it, play safe, put the money. Real estate has appreciated, no doubt about it. It went 4 times above. But, as a company, we perhaps could have grown faster. So don't, be, ashamed to take spaces on lease. Most of these other models are on lease, okay, lease premises. Equipment also, reagent rentals, something models you could look at rather than locking in the money into the, capital capex immediately. Franchise departments if you want, so you can break down the hospital, you could give dialysis to someone, you could give imaging to someone, you could think on those lines. There's nothing wrong in that. If you take a laboratory, and I was quite shocked myself, if you take a laboratory, 150 bed up to 150 bed hospitals, give it to a outsourced partner to say so, he will bring in the entire capex, technology, doctor, reagent, technicians, everything is his. He will pay the AC bills, and on top of it, will give you 40% of the top line, which is huge money. You need not block your capital unnecessarily. Unless, of course, you are of a big scale, you might like to own. So own versus lease or outsource, is something that one should always look for. Now, reducing cost of providing. This is the key, for India, because India is all about volumes, okay? And 2 specific, chains which come to my mind, which have leveraged this very well, is Narayan Rudalya, which is a high volume, low cost model, and the other one is Arvind Eye Care System based out of Madurai. I had that privilege of, going to Arvind, with one of my investors, because he wanted to an Arvind Eye Care model, and I was quite impressed by the way that they have done this. They do, about 1,000 odd eye surgeries, and their bottom line, so at that time was equivalent to that of a Hinduja hospital. I was amazed. Okay, that's the kind of thing that, they have done. So high volume, low cost is what India actually should look for. Okay, of course there will be players who will do the, high-end kind of work, but, most of it should go for this. Imbibing proper costing of procedures. I don't think that Indian hospitals today are looking at costing at all. Okay, I think to improve profitability, what we tend to do is increase the price, and that's it, and you earn more money. That's not the right way of doing it. Okay, you must get into this habit of costing. Activity-based costing is, something time has come, which we need to indulge. The only hospital which comes to my mind, which I had the privilege to work with, was Hinduja Hospital in Bombay, which has a full-blown, a costing department with 15 people doing just costing, day in and day out, okay? And the head of costing was a doctor with an MHA, and a lady at that, you can believe that, and she did a damn good job of it, okay? Hinduja's profitability, despite the fact, let me throw some, statistics, despite the fact that Hinduja has 6.5 or 7 staff per bed, okay, income per employee is highest in city of Bombay. Okay, so that shows the kind of efficiency, that they have in terms of, return on the investment that they are making, and that is because of the costing. Any time that the dollar moves up or down, Hinduja is the first hospital which is able to adjust their pricing. All right. So this is, something that we need to learn. That we need to learn to cost and then sell. Okay, cost plus whatever margin we want to sell. So if you're on high volume game, you will spend cost plus less margin. If you are a premium end, you will spend, and maybe make it a Taj Mahal. Reducing manpower cost. Okay, this is again something which I think we will need to learn, and I think as was seen in the presentations which were done by the WHO team in the morning, India, has its own peculiar problem. If you see on the tables which were given to us, we are ranking very low. We have a very high deficit of skilled manpower. Forget about nurses and doctors. If you talk of technicians, you talk of dialysis technicians, CSSG technicians, radiology technicians, medical record, people, even front desk, if you, see OT attendants, you won't find them. Nurse attendant, nurse aides, you won't find them, okay? I think that, this NSDC, National Skill Development Council, is trying to do that. I can share some experience that I have had. I chair a vertical in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which is focused on creation of this manpower, okay? So we take up students who are 10th or 12th pass, but working in a hospital environment, and we are giving them a very low cost, on-the-job training model in these streams. So we have taken out about 18 or 31, I don't remember the, exact, kind of numbers, but that's the number of, thing, and this will be a pan-India, kind of an initiative run through an NGO network, okay? So one NGO could be something like an IHMR, for example, or any Santokh Bahadur Durlabji hospital. And that is the way, so it's like, if you have heard of ITI, which is in manufacturing industry, where you train plumbers and, electricians, the same kind of model, but this will be an industry initiative, okay? Because no one else is going to help us. If, the government is unable to help us, someone has to do something. So this is something, we need to do, and we need to do it in big numbers, okay? Whenever you throw up those, slides which are common in any conference where so much is the deficit, 1 bed per 1,000, we need to go to 3 beds per 1,000, so you need so many beds, but you also need so much of human resource. Let me share with you another example. We did a study for the House of Tatas, about 8 years ago, I think around the time that Nano was brought out, and Mr. Ratan Tata wanted to roll out 20,000 beds in 5 years, okay? Even today, if you join Fortis and Apollo, you might just about reach 20,000 in terms of bed capacity. They wanted to do it in 5 years. But it fell apart because it got cleared by the pre-board, so when the final presentation was with Mr. Ratan Tata. And only one question he asked was, okay, we can allocate the kind of funding which is required. I think it was some 6,000-7,000 crores at that point in time. But is there enough manpower to man these beds? And there was a pin drop silence, okay, because everyone knew the answer, and the file is still stuck. They have not invested in healthcare because they believe that there is not enough manpower to do so, and that is right, okay? The government of India put up 6 aims. They are struggling to find doctors and skilled manpower to get into that. You talk of Jodhpur, which is in our Rajasthan. Every alternate day I see an ad in Times of India, okay? So that's manpower that we need to do something about it. Pooling purchases, like in capital, similar in consumables and drugs, you could do that. Use of telemedicine, there's another, poster here about telemedicine, and I'm quite, I'm quite sure that, time has come. This needs to be done. And if we are doing it Digital India, then this is part of Digital India, because this is the only way to reach healthcare in remote areas where you can't reach healthcare, Okay, there is no doctor, there will be many of them. I am also doctor. Okay, and if you ask me today, in Maharashtra, if you go and settle in Gadchiroli, okay, that's a Naxalite infested, town, or if someone asks you, okay, will you go and stay in Arunachal Pradesh? Okay, or maybe is anyone interested to go to Badmer? Okay, I don't see any hand will go up, isn't it? So there is some way that we need to reach to these people. And that's the only way, to do telemedicine with a second opinion backup, with bandwidth which is required. Okay, reducing cost of buying, because at the end of the day, whatever we speak, at the end of the day, you have to buy healthcare or take free healthcare. So the first thing that comes to mind is social insurance. Easy said than done, right? So we have fair number of social insurance schemes in this country as well. Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, which was mentioned in the morning session, 30,000 rupees, member, 5, people, family. I don't think what will happen in 30,000 rupees, but I work in Chhattisgarh, I'm doing some projects. That scheme is very popular in Chhattisgarh. There are a lot of hospitals which take this RSBY scheme. You go to Maharashtra, there is Rajiv Arogya scheme. Dr. Karanjekar feels is one of the better schemes, amongst this. I would still, rate Arogyasri, which I had some privilege of working with Arogyasri scheme in Andhra Pradesh along with the World Bank and IFC. But these kinds of schemes, can change the game. So I personally feel insurance is going to be a game changer if it rolls out faster in semi-urban and rural area. I mean, if you empower a person to buy healthcare, and that's the only way that you can grow healthcare, right? So one is social insurance. The other is, this ESIC, CGHS, central government or the public sector units or the Indian Army, they are big buyers of healthcare. So ESIC runs its own hospital, PSUs also run their own hospitals, and Indian Army also runs their own hospitals, but they still need healthcare out. Okay, so I would rather go and pool these and open it up for public if you want to, or at least bring in unorganized sector, which is out of ESIC gambit till now. And I think the current Ministry of Labor is looking at bringing in the unorganized sector, a mason, a farmer, a laborer, or an auto rickshaw driver. They all will need healthcare in some point in time. So why can't they be brought into some kind of a social security net? Okay, private health insurance certainly, has improved a lot over the years in terms of cashless, but what has also increased is the premium amount, isn't it? I mean, I remember what I used to spend 5,000, I'm now spending maybe 18,000, okay? And this is going to grow. This is going to grow because I think whatever I have heard in conferences is you take 100 rupees and, they are paying out 140, so at that rate it cannot go on. So this is, something, but it is happening, and I think 30 to 35% beds in Bombay at least are with insurance, private insurance patients. E-health, I think the time has come, and I think it will be someone like you only who will do this e-health business. There is Practo, and there is, so many other things. You hear that Ziggy, have you heard of Ziggy.com? And Ziggy? Have you heard of that? It's about, reaching medicines to your, family through e-health, okay? So it's already began with such a big bang that, retail chemists in Bombay went on strike, because it is going to eat into their business. It is like you just order, you are sitting here, your mother is, in say somewhere else, and you want to reach some drug to her, you just write that, the drug reaches, okay? That's a very good way to do it, okay? And this is going to happen, whether we like it or we don't like it, okay? Primary healthcare centers, I think India's primary healthcare infrastructure is poor. I mean, the infrastructure exists, but there is no service which gets provided. So people like Nationwide in Bangalore or, Health Springs in Mumbai or the many others which have sprung out, in cities like this, which are trying to bridge the primary healthcare, to the hospital healthcare. So that will perhaps become the gateway, okay? So now what is happening is, I mean, I have not gone to my GP, who's just below my building. He stays in my building only, but I don't go to him. So if I get, something in throat, The thing is, no, let us go and get an endoscopy done or something of that sort. Straight away to the institution without even bothering to go through the, tiered system which was there in good old days. I think that habit needs to be broken somewhere, that you need to. So these kinds of credible primary health centric, healthcare will perhaps change that, because that comes into a, corporatized model, with certain evidence-based medicine. So that might help. So more and more, of those centers perhaps will help India's cause. The last of the reducing cost of buying is about home health care. Okay, the concept actually began in United States of America. Okay, and they did it because they wanted to cut cost of health insurance. All right, I was just talking to someone who's put a poster there on American health insurance, and I just asked her, why are you doing this when this is a wrong model, and I was quite happy when the girl replied back, that is the reason why I'm taking this, because, I want to bring patients back from there. That's a nice confidence answer. So if you look at companies like Portia, for example, I think that idea will work. It will take them some time, but this is one way of cutting cost of healthcare by not going to the hospital, but taking the healthcare, in your comfort of your home. So you could do phlebotomy, you could do physiotherapy, you could do ultrasound, you could do geriatric care, you could do prenatal, antenatal, postnatal, care at home, and I think that will help us. I think this is my last slide. Reduction in healthcare costs will thus require three-pronged strategy, is I think, managing the capex intelligently. Okay, spend the money, we don't have the money anyways. Okay, so if you are spending something, then spend it intelligently. If you want a nursing home, then build a nursing home. Don't go and build a Taj Mahal. Okay, because that's not what you want. You want to focus on something, and this boutique thing is also going to stay. This minimal invasive surgery centers, infertility centers, and those kinds of things which are there, say cosmetic, kind of thing, mother and child, arthroscopy, these kind of things are going to come and stay. Managing the OPEX, okay, so operational expenditure, there are and others who will talk about that, and improving the purchasing power, so those three things, if we are able to do, we should see a reduction in healthcare costs, and then maybe, better times to come. Thank you so much. I am leaving my email address. You are free to call me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vivek Desai, for very interesting presentation on reducing cost, and especially through the cutting from the provider's perspective, how the providers in the hospital, they can cut the cost and then they can produce the healthcare services.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Somehow it's always my luck or the confidence of the organizers who ask me to speak that I'm either speaking immediately after lunch or I'm speaking when people want to go home. So, well, I've been called here to talk about cost reduction in healthcare. And whether it's healthcare or whether it's industry or hospitality or any business, every businessman that you work for and will work for in your careers in the future are always going to love this topic. And if you can go and tell him, sir, I will help you reduce your cost, he will love you. So let us see how you can make your businessman employee fall in love with you. Primarily, you have to understand from the business context, what are they looking for. So as we go through this presentation, I will be taking you through the need for cost reduction. I mean, this doesn't have to be explained too much in detail. It's always understood, but good to start with it. And where to look for cost reduction, it's very important. In a hospital setup, where do you actually look for cost reduction? There's one little case study that is there about cost reduction in procurement, and then the main topic about cost of poor quality. Now that's something that will be relatively new to you. It's the cost of poor quality. Dr. Karanjekar here is very well aware of this topic. A few examples on the harvesting the benefits of reduction in COPQ, and finally some examples of COPQ reduction in healthcare that have been done. So first of all, the first question and the first thing that we need to understand from a businessman's point of view, what is the primary driver for businesses? Why does a business exist? Very good. To make money. Be honest about it always helps. Right? We can always be philanthropic and say that, oh, business is for social good and we are there for social public health and everything. Well, fine, that's good. We can do more of it and we can do it very well and be good at doing it, provided we keep making the money. Right? So business is about generating wealth, and that's going to be primary. Of course, there are going to be many secondary purposes to it also, but primary purpose will always remain making money. Now, to make money, there are two ways. One is if you are in a monopolistic market, you keep raising the prices and compel the people to pay the money for providing the services. Unfortunately, on this planet, we have run out of that opportunity. The next opportunity is when man settles on Moon or Mars. So either you can wait for that or we'll have to see what we can do on this planet. So in the highly competitive world of business, the only option left to businesses, left to people are to look at reducing costs. That is the only engine that will help make more wealth. And when we talk about wealth, wealth is not about top line. Wealth is what you make out of the top line, the ultimate profit margin. That is what contributes to wealth. Because a lot of organizations talk about top line of being 2,000 crores, 3,000 crores, 5,000 crores, but then वो नीचे वाला हाथ जब आ जाता है ना bottom line का तब वो सब खत्म हो जाता है. So it's very important that the difference between the top line and bottom line should be maintained and should be large enough to create that wealth. Now, looking at reducing costs, so where is this need? We say, okay, competitive market, we need to reduce costs. So why? I mean, what is so great about a competitive market that the only way to make money or to make wealth is that we need to reduce cost? The first and most important thing is the ever-increasing patient expectations. Patients want best of facilities, best of infrastructure. I want the best of equipment to serve my patients, the best doctors. I want IT support. I want tabs to see. I want apps to see nowadays there are apps that are coming up where you sitting in the US can see your mother in the hospital in Jaipur and talk to them. So they want the best of technology. They want the best of facilities. They want the ambience of the hospital to be very good. It feels good to go inside an hospital. Cafeterias are no longer good. They want food courts. So, patient demands keep on increasing, but you can't tell the patient that for every rising demand, I'm also going to increase the price. Then that's not acceptable. So the price has to remain the same. In fact, try and go lower if possible. But facilities and infrastructure services have to keep improving day by day. So that's the pressure that's there, for which cost reduction becomes imperative. The next thing is ever-increasing cost of service delivery. We're speaking about manpower. We're speaking about nursing expertise. We're talking about radiology expertise, lab, path. So all these expertise are getting more and more costly. I mean, you will be expecting higher and higher salaries every month, every year. So cost of resources, cost of the service delivery itself is also keep rising every day. But again, I cannot say that because I've hired the best of MBA students from IHMR, I'm going to charge you higher, right? So we can't say that. So still have to keep the costs low. Second is the ever-increasing cost of technology and equipment. Again, Dr. Desai mentioned that people are going for 5 Tesla and 3 Tesla and 7 Tesla machines. Okay, if their purpose for going for that may be different, but still, it is the cost of equipment and technology that are also rising. So all these rising costs, and the fact that with these rising costs, you can't still increase price. Your price still has to remain same or go lower. So what do? The only thing is that you have to reduce your own operating costs. And of course, the most important thing that people are now talking about, the quest to provide world-class healthcare services at affordable prices. So we are looking as hospitals and healthcare organization, as a healthcare fraternity in this country, we are looking to provide world-class services. And naturally, when you talk about world-class services, it has a cost, but then it has to be at an affordable price. So putting all these things together, as you can see on this slide, that the need for cost reduction is imperative. Rising costs of technology, rising costs of services, rising cost of expectations of the patients, all that put together. So now where do we look for it? Okay, cost reduction is important, cost reduction is necessary, cost reduction is imperative. Where do you look for cost reduction? What do we say? So what do we do for cost reduction? Say someone gives suggestion that AC should be put off. Run the ACs lesser. Wherever there is no patient there, switch off the AC. Consume less paper. So all these ad hoc mechanisms of cost reduction don't work. Switching off electricity here and there, not reducing the consumption of paper in some department here and there, reducing the number of printouts that can be taken here and there, those don't help. Neither are they sustainable. For a few days when pressure is there, management is looking, so boss is looking, so supervisor is looking, you will do. Once he goes on tour, again same thing will happen. So these things are not sustainable. How do you get into sustainable cost reduction? That's most important. Where do you look for sustainable cost reduction? So sustainable cost reduction can be achieved in these major areas. One is material. And material, I don't mean the medical equipment. Material are those consumables that you use in order to take care of the patient. Consumables that get used in your patient care processes, like patient files and other consumables, housekeeping stuff, and all those consumables, those materials. The other opportunity for cost reduction is in the process itself. The process of service delivery. The process of healthcare service delivery. That's the biggest area where cost reduction and sustained cost reduction can be achieved. I'll show you how. And then we have information. This is one more area. Exchange of information, maintaining of information, records, patient information. One of the major cost areas for organizations. The cost of maintaining, managing patient information. That's definitely an area where a lot of reduction can be achieved. And finally, utilization of all that expensive medical equipment and infrastructure that you have put into place. Ensure the utilization, how to have the most effective utilization so that costs are lesser. So let's look at them one by one. First of all, material. How do we look at reducing cost of material? One is bulk ordering. You know, if you're trying, instead of going for small quantity purchase, you go for large quantity purchase, then of course you get, for volumes, you'll get lesser cost. Try and get into rate contracts. It's very important. A lot of these consumables that get consumed all the time, gloves, bandages, stuff, they are getting consumed all the time. So you can get into annual rate contracts because you know there's a certain quantity, you can predict the amount of these items that you want. So predictable purchases can be economized through rate contracts. So you set up an annual rate contract of a fixed amount, they'll give you a cheaper price. Another very important thing is minimum reordering levels. Lot of time the cost of procuring materials goes high because suddenly stocks have run out, we want things on emergency. Emergency purposes, emergency transportation, all these are high cost areas. So for regularly consumed items, have a system of finding out, establishing some minimum reordering quantities. At what level, suppose the number of glove boxes go down to 20, then I should order 200 more. So that kind of system should be there, so that you are never out of stock, and then you don't have to go get into emergency because this is always required. If it is run out now, I want in next 1 hour. So next 1 hour, how to get emergency purchase, emergency transport. 5 times the cost. So such situations should be avoided in terms of materials. So these 3 things are major areas, major approaches that you can use in order to reduce cost in material procurement. Bulk ordering, rate contracts, and minimum ordering levels. For process, cost reduction in processes, you have to look at cost of poor quality. We will be looking at cost of poor quality little more detail. And again, outsourcing of non-core processes, a topic that Dr. Desai also touched upon about outsourcing. So as far as reducing cost of process is concerned, these 2 approaches will help you. Information, reducing the cost of information. Digitization, that's the way the world is moving. No more paper. There are hospitals which are today working in India on paperless. Columbia Asia hospitals, I know I have consulted to them. They are a paperless hospital. Several other hospitals also are moving towards this paperless situation. So go in for as much digitization. There is no need to maintain thick patient files. I know my friend Dr. Parag Rindani, he is the CEO of Wockhardt Hospital, South Mumbai. All his patient information is maintained on tabs. Every patient, the moment he is admitted, gets a tab. and all patient information goes into that tab. From admission to discharge, everything. So we look into this paper is very degradable. I mean, it gets torn, there's a lot of problems that happen in paper. So try and go for paperless offices. Another very important area is integrated IT systems for hospital management. Many hospitals, you see, for OT, they have different software, for nursing, different software, for finance, different software, 5, 6 different softwares floating around in the hospital. But when it comes for billing, then all these information from all these different systems and different softwares have to be collated, and final bill has to be prepared. A lot of time is wasted, a lot of errors happen, and a lot of cost is incurred. So try and look for integrated MIS, HMIS for all functions of the hospital. That also helps. Finally, we look at utilization. Utilization is very important. Effective utilization of the infrastructure, effective utilization of equipment and OT, and very important, effective utilization of human resource. What is this utilization all about? Utilization is what contributes to conversion cost. How much money are you spending behind a patient? You are earning money per bed, per hour, per day from a patient, but you're also spending money behind that patient in terms of all the infrastructure, all the resources, all the people, and all the equipment that you have provided for the healthcare system. Improving the utilization reduces the conversion cost of these equipment, these facilities per patient. You reduce the conversion cost per patient, your profits go up, you can do more patients at same price. So it's very important to look at utilization. A lot of times this is neglected in the name of medical license. One small case study that I'd like to share with you. It's a scenario. Hospital expenses for patient files, those spring files that are used for storing patient records. Patient files almost 10 lakhs per annum. Imagine spending 10 lakh rupees per year just to buy files. The diagnosis, why was this happening? Because unplanned purchasing as per requirement. Whenever it was required, 500 files were procured, 300 files were procured, 200 files were procured. So whenever it was required, it was procured, and almost always as emergency urgent purchase. Solution was established economic ordering quantity. So anytime you want to purchase patient files, you have to purchase minimum 5,000 files. You cannot purchase less than that. And along with minimum ordering level. So the moment the number of files went down to 100, another 5,000 was procured. It was automatic system. By that time, by that method, the annual savings was more than 3 lakhs. So this is a simple example of how cost reduction can be obtained just by simple logical thinking. Outsourcing, that's one thing that, of course, for reducing process cost, a very important element is outsourcing. Let us consider that blue dot you can see is equal to the cost of running the hospital. And let's consider functions directly managed by hospital staff. When all functions are directly managed by hospital staff, your cost is that big. When core and technical functions are managed by hospital staff, but non-technical functions like housekeeping, cafeteria, all those are outsourced, you see the cost to the hospital comes down. Direct cost will come down because you're outsourcing to the other, they will of course do it cheaper rate. The purpose of doing outsourcing is direct cost to you versus it being a variable cost, and that features as a lesser cost. And of course it's a vendor relationship, so you can get better prices. But only when the hospital functions, focuses only on core functions and has the ability to even outsource the technical processes like radiology, like labs. So like Dr. Desai was saying that today, even those lab, you'd outsource the entire lab to SRL Diagnostics, for example. You outsource your nutrition to one of the food companies, for example. So you don't need dietitian, you don't need nutrition, you don't need a cafeteria, you don't need a canteen, you don't need a kitchen that you own. It is run by somebody else. And they pay you for it. There, that's a cost component. If it takes 15 minutes to do that, those 15 minutes cost the hospital. Now there's an actual cost that the hospital incurs for the way that he does this process. And there is an ideal cost that would have been incurred if this would have been done in the perfect way. the perfect way of doing things. If everything happened the perfect way of doing things, then there would be a certain cost. That is called as the ideal cost. But of course, things don't happen the perfect way. Everything goes wrong. There are errors, there are mistakes, there are delays, and because of which there's an actual cost. So if I subtract the ideal cost from the actual cost, then is what I get is my COPQ, the cost of poor quality. More